Good morning, year eights. Okay then, so we're going to be working with our picture from last week. This was the one in terms of the window, looking out. It was amazing to see the responses that you sent me, and obviously those that have been received have been marked. I think a special mention to Jawi, who actually is Star of the Week. I think his work was amazing. If you haven't had a chance to see it, it is on our particular chat area, so do have a look. Today I want to have a look at some colour pencil work. So I've got some colour pencils here ready. I just want to show you a couple of techniques which I want to see in your work for this particular lesson. So I won't waste too much time in talking about sort of various different things from last week. So first of all, I'm just going to create a very rough suggestion of a tree just to get us started. Now, this tree is small and this tree is in the distance. So if this is you will find that when you're using colour pencil, the colour pencil will not be as strong in the distance. It will be a lot fainter. So you might want to choose perhaps a colour that is a bit softer in terms of the colours that you would have perhaps if there's a tree close up. Now, look how I'm applying the colour pencil. I'm not pressing on too hard because I want it to be quite soft. I'm just giving it a little bit of texture just by, rather than doing this. If I do that, you're flattening the object, okay? Because actually, even the distance from me, I can see some trees which are quite some distance away from me. I can see that there is texture. So you're going to apply texture by just sort of rolling the pencil like such. Okay, I won't do the whole thing because I haven't got time to do that, but you do. And then there will be some shadowing in some of that tree as well. So I'd like you, if you've got the pencils, to just introduce some light and darker areas as well, just so that we've got a bit of variation in green. You never find a tree just one colour. You know, even when it's in autumn season, you'll see variations of different colours. Okay, so if the tree was closer up, let's imagine that this tree is a bit closer. Your shading, and by the way, you never have trees like this, I'm just doing it for argument's sake. I will actually be able to see perhaps more individual shapes. So I might actually start to see much bigger shapes appearing. So when I'm colouring, don't have to be very precise unless you're actually drawing something really close up. Perhaps it was on your windowsill and it's a plant of some description. But I'm actually going to use some slightly bigger areas. Now notice I've got some gaps in between. That's not a problem. Again, I'm probably going to take another colour, because these bits are going to be in shading, just in shadow, just on the inside. Because remember, there's various different elements to a tree. You might even see a branch sticking out. I'll show you that in a minute, actually. So there you can see just a little bit. Can you see the difference between this here, which is much bigger and chunkier, and this one here? Also notice I've pressed on harder here than I have here. I could probably press on even harder still. Again, depends on how close the object is to you, to how dark that object will be. If there is a branch, it's not often, unless it's autumn, that branch will be fully exposed. But I take a standard brown. I'm not going to quite complete it, because what I want to do is I want then my leaves just to sort of take the edges off. Quite often you find that branches sort of peep out and then they go back in again. So you don't usually see the whole thing, so unless it's a bare tree, and I don't think many of you will see that at this time of year. So again, go back to my lighter one, putting in some slightly chunkier leaf shapes. And even though I did this at the beginning, this kind of shape, that's not good, I'm going to just try and add a few little details of leaves just sticking out there, just to break up the surface, make it look a little bit more authentic, more real, rather than it sort of being this sort of solid cartoony shape which I've started with, which was a very bad example. Okay, so now we've had a little look at sort of tree detail. what else can you might expect in your picture? Well, one of the other things that I noticed from your work, we're seeing sort of brickwork. Okay, so brickwork, again, it's one of those things where if they're close up, you will see the detail. You've got to kind of make sure that you get the right sort of build on bricks, because if they're not positioned sort of like that, then the wall's going to fall down. If it's a little bit further in the distance, you might not actually see more the individual bricks, but you might see a collection of shapes that would suggest that there's some brickwork there as you go into the distance. As you get really into the distance, there's a couple of things you can do. You might just put 1 or 2 bricks, tiny ones, just sort of sitting in the distance, or your building might actually not have anything at all. So let's just imagine there's a building there and it might be just too far away. So close up, medium, and then of course long distance. Here again, I want you to try, if you can, to use a range of pencils. If you've got an orange and a red, okay, that should be enough. You could use yellow, depends on what kind of brickwork you see. You might see something quite sandy. I've got a bit of a range there of different tones. So I think I'm not going to choose all of mine, but I'm going to take probably the more sandier tones. Probably take those ones and then a bit of that. So the mortar that sits in between the bricks is probably the lightest bit. So again, press on a little bit harder if you're seeing much stronger colours because they're close up. That colour's quite bright, that one. You probably won't find that you'll need to use that bright yellow. And then I'm going to put in my brickwork. Now, bricks are quite flat, so shading up and down or side to side is absolutely fine for brickwork. Okay, so putting the brickwork in, and then there's going to be some shadows, or certainly something that's going to be textured on the brick. So I'm going to use a slightly darker colour, and I'm just going to add some shadows around the edges and a little bit of unevenness just onto the surface of the brick, just to break it up a little bit. Again, if you don't have multicolours, then what you could do is use your brown pencil in lots of ways. So here's my pencil there, and then if I want to press on harder, and I can still create lights and darks using that. From a distance, the colour starts to weaken a little bit. Here I'll just maybe not see so much of the yellow mortar this time. Make sure that you do fill it in, don't sort of leave white gaps, because that will make your object look translucent. Okay, and then this time I'm going to take the brown and I'm going to use that to sort of help bring some of those lines back, but not too strong. I don't want them to stand out too solid, but I do want to still see sort of those shapes. So you can see how I'm just going back around some of those shapes, just because the grey pencil's merging back into the colour now. There we go. So we're seeing a little bit more distance, and then working right into the distance, just going to put in orange if you want. Again, just what we said about here, those little sort of, you could put a little bit of extra detail on the building, but not much, just to sort of break it up. So close, medium, distance, and think about your colour choices. Okay, so overall I think that the colour exercise will be really interesting, just to see what people have produced. Remember, you're using the same picture as last week. If there's some alterations to be done to that, just make sure that you've made those before you start colouring. Colour pencil doesn't rub out very well, so it's important that you try to do the pencil work and get that up to date first before you start adding the colour. And then what I'll expect is that all updates on your colour pencil work will be whizzed through to me before our next lesson. So I'm going to set a deadline of next Monday for having this work in. That gives you a bit more time to update anything that you have to. Okay, I'm staying online, so please do ask questions, send anything through early if you need to, and I'll be there to answer your questions.